So to begin with, what we noticed early on was that teachers were feeling when they're teaching remotely and they're not getting that full engagement, as Nicole is mentioning, um, that grades, for example, were not big motivators anymore. The typical carrots or things that they would hold in front of students to get them to comply or to do the activities in a classroom just were non-existent any longer in an online environment. And they also felt a lot of pressure to try to cover all of the standards when they're not really seeing their kids as often as they would in a face-to-face environment. And they also felt that compartmentalizing and having an ELA block and a math block and a science block just really was counterintuitive to this new environment of kids coming online certain times a day and trying to access content. And we started out just with the mindset shift and explaining to them that, okay, we're no longer planning for teaching, we're planning for learning. And that kind of takes the pressure off as well, because how do I teach in this environment? And how do I learn, how do I, as the educator, become the expert in the room with all of these new platforms and things? We're able to kind of take that pressure off and say, the main goal here is that kids are learning. And so what does the brain science say about how kids learn and how they take things from, their working memory to their long-term memory? And so when you start thinking that way, then you start designing with the big ideas in mind, the big key takeaways or important objectives that we want our kids to walk away with. So those teams of teachers, they got a template and they were able to work collaboratively together and come up with kind of their big guiding question or inquiry question, and then take students through these 6 phases of learning, from sparking interest to committing to our goals, kind of like co-creating goals for the unit, some formative cycles of skills and content are built in so that kids get the practice in those skills. And then reflection was a built-in piece, which a lot of teachers typically in a typical classroom, reflection is kind of an oversight. Like, we don't plan it into our lessons. So that was eye-opening for teachers. And then at the end, it culminates in a performance assessment, which, again, partnering with Nicole and the grad profile work, we helped support teachers in developing performance assessments that are more authentic and relevant to the students. And so the teachers that I've spoken to who have gone through this blueprint design process have found that their students were producing such more work and more relevant work than they could have anticipated in an online environment where engagement is lacking and kids don't log in every day and they're not turning in assignments. But through this process, the teachers were pleasantly surprised in the type of and the quality of work that kids were able to produce when it wasn't about grades and it wasn't about every day you have this task to complete. It was more about the culminating, what is the big takeaway we want you to learn about.
What I heard over and over from them is like, this gives me hope. This is the work that's actually getting me through the pandemic, because I can see the other side of, like, if we could get this in front of students more frequently, you see that fire that Natasha's kind about, where they're producing things, it's authentic, it feels real, it feels relevant. And so they articulated often that this work is actually what was getting them through the muck of the days where it was like, oh, we're back in school, oh, we're out of school, or we're that we experienced for months.